The thoroughfare thrummed with the vibrant pulse of commerce and conversation. Merchants calling out prices and products, vendors compelling bystanders to buy their food, cafes catering coffee and cream cake to its customers. Student had never been here before. Not to this street, not to this atmosphere, not with these people. But some part of him had been there before. In some ways it felt like home. As he meandered meticulously, counting the cobblestones beneath his feet, Student collided with another pedestrian, to which he, abruptly lifting his gaze to apologize, found himself eye to eye, well, face to face with a woman. She had no eyes, no nose, no ears, only a mouth. Startled, Student reeled back and palely looked around, absorbing the eerie reality that no one had eyes or noses. Half of the people on the street boasted ears but no mouth, and the other half mouth with no ears. All the noise on the street had stopped as those who were standing started inching forward, and those who were seated stood to observe. Student turned to run away from the crowd, but with each passing step his eyes began to dissolve and dim. Reaching to touch his face, he felt his eyes float away as billows of golden dust. Halting, he noticed a man some distance in front of him. As the surroundings continued to blur, the man merged into greater clarity until nothing was left but the man. Every pore and breath and intention. Then, like a flash of lightning, all went white. Then all went to impenetrable dark. Student raised up out of his sheets in a frenzy, opening his eyes to make sure they were still there. He then rubbed them and groaned. It's too early. Moments passed, but what he had just seen had kept him from falling back to sleep. Sluggishly, the teenager rolled out of bed and got ready for a walk. Walks always cleared his head. With just enough time to make it to the hilltop for sunrise, his trek began. The march to the hilltop park was a bit begrudging, a bit uncertain, a bit blind. The midnight had spoken, but he didn't understand its call. As he walked by the light of his phone, the park bench became silhouetted by the eerie, sickly clouds above. Orange had not yet flooded the cloud-bruised sky. Each footstep crunched as gravel shifted beneath his weight. The city at the foot of the hill slowly inched as his perspective ever rose. After ascending a bit further, Student reached the peak, crowned with a lonely diadem of a park bench. Turning, he looked over the city sprawled beneath, and sat. Lately, Student had been drifting. Detached. His relationship with his parents, his interest he had in this girl from school, his own observations and truth about himself, his interactions with that which is divine. Maybe that's why I'm up. I just can't shake it. He felt everything he tried to draw near got pushed away. Pulling out his phone, Student looked at his reflection by the pale light of an imminent dawn and noted his eyes didn't look like his eyes. He continued reasoning with himself in the silence and doubting himself in the dark. Slowly, the sun emerged, intruding both sky and head. Sunrise transformed this bench into a place where kings meet. Regal light flooded the valley. A golden breeze came from the city and moved the trees to dancing. Melodies crescendoed as the earth came alive, both above and below. Standing, Student stepped forward to get a better look over the earth. For a moment, all that mattered was the sun's warmth. It wasn't cold, but it had a magnetism to it. It didn't give purpose and erase doubt. It was just warm. He turned back to sit again, and on the bench next to where he was sitting sat a stone sheep. He felt silly that it held such a high place in his heart, but it was his most prized possession. The fullness of what made him feel sure of anything, all wrapped in a tiny emerald hue. It reminded him of that trip his grandmother had taken him on a few years before she passed. She had bought it for him in that petrol station tucked away in the hills. There was one relationship he never doubted. He was pretty certain his grandmother was perfect, or as close as one could get. He grabbed the object, both hands caving around the tiny idol. Weird. I don't remember bringing this with me, he mused aloud. As light soon became blinding and the noise settled to background waste, Student pocketed the trinket and moved to leave. A short distance away, a familiar magnetism pulled his head back up the hill. Gaze ascended, his looking back discovered a man standing beside the bench. But that couldn't be. The bench was a dead end to that path. One way up and one way down. There was no way someone had passed him he would have noticed. The student began retracing his steps and quickly recognized the man as the same one from his dream. It couldn't be. As he neared, the figure melted and transformed into a path, his body stretching and embedding itself into the hillside. Where once stood a man, now rested a road of bright pink stone trailing where there once was no path. At the summit again, stymied by the transfiguration of a familiar stranger, the student studied the new path. At its visible end stood yet another figure, beckoning him forward. The student drew near. Before long, the student made out this man's stature. There he stood. The man with no eyes, no nose. One ear was cut off, the other whole. His mouth was wide and thin. Half was sewn shut. Golden thread X'd across his face.
"I see you,"
he exclaimed.
"Come closer that I might hear you."
His voice radiated from his bones. His mouth moved, but no voice had ever been so whole on any two lips, much less half the lips. Student stumbled forward. The air thickened as he drew close.
"Stop! Come no further. You must make a sacrifice if you wish to hear what I have to say."
The man moved to the left and motioned to a porcelain altar that had been hiding behind him. I have some money."
"No. Money is easily made, and if its image-bearer's authority changes, then the tender is rendered impoverished."
Rifling through his breeches pocket, he summoned the stone sheep.
"What would you make of my stone sheep? Its value is priceless to me."
"What good is its wool to me? Sand, I say, it's but sand, great to be placed in an hourglass, but I want nor need time or warmth."
Driven by something beyond the heartbreak of what he was about to offer, student exclaimed, "But what if I gave it to you from my adoration and desire? My only real companion."
"Ah, adoration and desire. This warms my heart."
With that, the man turned to face the altar, and grabbing it with both hands, tore off a shard. Reaching up to his mouth, he pulled the thread out that had shut his lips and then gathered a stick from his altar. Using the string, he began binding the pieces together.
"Do you want my allegiance? Just my word?"
Student called to break the silence.
"Give me your sight."
With that, he threw at student's feet an axe of sharpest porcelain.
"Gouge out your eyes."